Good Friday evening to you. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. Thanks for joining More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. The Browns and the rest of the NFL chugging ahead towards kickoff coming up in just a few days. Training camp has wrapped up, and we're going to talk plenty about the Browns. Let's bring in Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer, Dan Labbe. Dan, training camp's wrapped up. It's game prep week straight ahead. What are some of the takeaways that you've had from Browns training camp out in Berea? No fans, you got to see it.
Yeah, it was a very strange camp with no fans there, and everything was just a little bit slower. You could tell they were trying to install a lot of things. There weren't a ton of super competitive periods, but they came in with a plan, and you could just tell they wanted to get this offense installed, get everything precise. It is a precision-based offense. We saw the defense was very active. They're going to try a bunch of different things. They were the loudest unit on the practice field most days. They were able to force some turnovers, which I guess you could argue is a bad thing, but probably a good thing for the defense. We really kind of saw them almost in regular season mode from the start. They weren't really practicing super hard. They were just really kind of working to get ready for week one and trying to nail down all the things they need to nail down to be ready to play a football game.
Of course, one of the bigger stories in training camp, Grant Delpit, second-round pick, torn Achilles out. So the Browns addressed that position in a trade late in training camp, and they get, by all accounts, a pretty good safety from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Cost them a fifth-round pick in next year's draft. But this is a guy that's used to winning, and when you hear people talk about him, really talented and above all, just a guy that seems to be in the right place on the field when he needs to be.
And you like that he's only 23 years old. He's in his third season, but he's still only 23. This is a former third-round pick, so he's got a little bit of that pedigree as well. From Alabama, this team really seems to like those SEC guys this offseason. They've gone out and gotten a bunch of them. But the other thing is, he can kind of play all over the place. So he played a lot of free safety last year, but he also played up in the box. He played some corner. He played some nickel. And that was sort of the role they had in mind for Grant Delpit, is have him play at all different levels, a bunch of different positions. And Ronnie Harrison seems like a guy that can come in, and maybe he's not going to give you exactly what Grant Delpit did, but he can maybe check some of those boxes off that you had planned for Delpit, because Joe Woods really sounded like losing Delpit was a big blow to this defense just because of all the things he had planned for him.
A guy that played for Nick Saban, and when you hear Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl coordinator, the guy that helps pick it, he had some really interesting things to say and some high compliments for Harrison as well.
Yeah, and he mentioned that Minka Fitzpatrick. What really happened was Jim Nagy says that it was Harrison who was kind of communicating with Nick Saban, and it was Harrison who was sort of leading the back end of that defense. So, again, you're bringing in a guy with those leadership qualities. He's got a lot of things you like. I love the size. I keep going back to the size, but he's 6'3", 214. That's exactly, that's a big safety, and you love to have that in the back end of your defense. And listen, there's a scenario where maybe you really like him and Grant Delpit comes back next year, and who knows, maybe you've stumbled across your safety duo for a long time.
The other thing is they did trade for a linebacker in Malcolm Smith earlier, a couple weeks ago. So those are areas that were kind of, they needed to be addressed basically because guys went down in camp, and it looks like they have, and it looks like they've gotten some guys that have played in the league and gotten a little more veteran on the defensive side of the ball.
And I don't know what Malcolm Smith can bring you. I don't know if he can be an every down player. I don't know if he's a part-time player. I'm not sure what Malcolm Smith has left. But right now, he's a guy who comes in, he's a grown-up. And you need to have grown-ups in that room. I kind of likened it to Adrian Claiborne, too. Now, Adrian Claiborne was really productive last year. But they're both kind of in the same vein. They're grown-ups in rooms that are really young. They're guys that have won, guys that have been successful. And I think you need that. If you're trying to build a culture and build a winning culture, you got to have guys that have played and won before. And Malcolm Smith is just kind of another one of those guys that, however long he's here, whether it's all season, whether he's just kind of a stopgap until Mack Wilson is healthy, or you change the position up a little bit, he's a guy that's going to help you learn how to win and learn how to set that culture.
When you look at that side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, what areas are you kind of going, yeah, they really gotta figure that out in order to be successful?
Well, I'm even though we just talked about the linebackers and how bringing in Malcolm Smith is a help. I'm still a little can really hold down that middle all season. I don't know how he'll be as a guy in coverage. Sione Takitaki had a really good camp, but that's camp. We've got to see him do it on the field in games. So I'm still a little nervous about that position. And the safety position, too. I love the addition of Harrison, but you did get worse there when Delpit got hurt. And now you might be relying on a guy like Sheldrick Redwine that we don't really know a lot about. Andrew Sendejo, I don't know how much he has left. Carl Joseph, former first-round pick, but Oakland didn't want to keep him. So there's a lot of question marks really at those two positions.
Well, and you mentioned them. Those are kind of merged together in the current day NFL, the safeties and linebackers, because you play so many three wides and people like to throw the ball all over the place. A lot of times you'll take safety out, take a linebacker out, put a safety in. So those are basically a unit that's been merged, and it's got to be concerning that those are where the question marks lie for the Browns.
And they're very important in Joe Wood's defense. He wants to play three safeties. I think we will see a lot of two linebacker sets. I mean, safety is a really important position, so they've got to have a guy that can do all those different things and create some problems. You can take a linebacker off the field, put a safety out there, like you said. Those are important positions, but safety is the really big one because he wants to use his safeties. That's where you really find the versatility. And again, that's where Delpit was supposed to be, and now he's not there.
The other thing would be, if you were drawing it up and you were Joe Woods, how do you deal with the question marks? You have that front four just get after the quarterback and dominate. There's the talent there, but it was kind of, you couldn't figure out why that defense up front didn't dominate last year the way it was expected to.
And it starts with Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is obviously a wrecking ball of a defensive end, and I think he can be even better than what we've seen. I think there's plays he could finish that he didn't finish last year. This is a guy that wants to be Defensive Player of the Year, and when you think of guys that have won that award, you think of watching the Rams, and all you ever see is 99 Aaron Donald. You think of watching the Texans when J.J. Watt was winning those awards, and you saw him, it seemed like, almost every play. And that's the next step for Myles Garrett. And then after that, it's about health. Olivier Vernon has to be able to stay on the field. They're counting very heavily on him. Sheldon Richardson has to be as good as he was last year. Larry Ogunjobi has to take that next step in a contract year. It's really just about those guys getting better and being just a little bit better than they were last year. And that's when that front four can be great.
How excited are you about the additions? And I know Billings opting out probably is and again, you got to respect a guy for doing that with his concerns, but there is the chance for the additions on that defensive front line to be significant.
Yeah, and I really love the Jordan Elliott pick. I really want to see what he can do. I think he's a guy that Pro Football Focus is one site that really loved him, but I know Dane Brugler had him ranked fairly high, and you ended up getting him in the third round. So I'm really curious to see what he can do coming out of Missouri, creating pressure up the middle. Adrian Claiborne's a guy I mentioned, a veteran, but that's depth that you need that you didn't have last year. Remember last year when Myles Garrett was suspended, all of a sudden you had almost nobody that could rush the passer because Vernon was out for a little while too. So adding depth to there, you can move Sheldon Richardson to the outside if you need to. But I'm really curious about that interior rotation and how they're going to roll those guys through because Andrew Berry likened it to a hockey line after they drafted Jordan Elliott. But we're going to have guys coming in and out and kind of switching things up, especially in the middle.
Last thing I'll ask you before we go to break on the defensive side of the ball, who are some guys that you really thought stood out from what you saw at camp? And again, I know it's kind of tough to judge because they didn't do a lot of competitive periods, but who are some guys that you kind of went, boy, it's going to be interesting to see what he does once we get to game time?
Well, one guy is, a guy you'd expect to stand out, but it was just good to see. Denzel Ward, I thought, had a really good camp. Got his hands on the football. One day he had a pick six. He was very active, and he looked like a guy who's ready to get back to being the Pro Bowler he was his rookie year. And really kind of sticking in that secondary. When Kevin Johnson was on the field before he got hurt, he was really good. And then MJ Stewart, a waiver claim in August, comes in for him. Now, he has a hamstring issue, but before he got hurt, he was pretty good. That's kind of the theme of the cornerbacks and the safeties, how they played before they got hurt. But I think a lot of guys in the secondary really played well. And then we talk about depth on the defensive front. A name that some people might remember from last year who got an opportunity, Porter Gustin. He kind of moved up, and when Myles Garrett or Olivier Vernon weren't practicing, he was out there getting first-team reps. So that's just an interesting story to keep an eye on. He's an undrafted guy, kind of came out of nowhere last year to get playing time, and it seems like he's someone they like.
Dan Labbe, beat reporter for cleveland.com. On the Browns side of things, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We're going to step aside and take a quick timeout. When we come back, Dan will rejoin us. We'll switch our attention to the offensive side of the football. More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition continues. We continue talking Browns as they get ready for the 2020 regular season.
Presque Isle Downs and Casino has sports betting. Use one of our 50 state-of-the-art Bet America kiosks to place your bet and watch your favorite games on one of our many HD televisions or visit our sportsbook area. Only at Presque Isle Downs and Casino.
Do you like Ohio State football? Would you like to get information from me, Doug Lesmerises, about Ohio State football without having to look at my face? We have got the plan for you. Become an Ohio State text subscriber through cleveland.com. You send a text, 614-350-3315. What do you get? 2, 3, 4 texts right in your phone every day about Ohio State football. Inside information, polls, voting, all kinds of things. You can be on our podcast. We take text subscriber questions on our Buckeye Talk podcast every week. If you really want to be involved with Ohio State football, in season or out of season, become an Ohio State text subscriber from cleveland.com. Send a text to 614-350-3315. 14-day free trial. What do you have to lose? $3.99 a month after that. 614-350-3315. I'll see you in your phone.
Tri-C is here for you. Now more than ever, you need a post-secondary education. So I encourage you to start your journey here at Tri-C. The majority of fall classes will take place online, but we've added a variety of formats to meet your learning needs, and we've taken many steps to keep you safe on campus. Whether you're ready to get started or your four-year plans have changed, Tri-C is where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon. The Browns chugging ahead, getting ready for the beginning of the 2020 regular season. Let's welcome back in Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer, Dan Labbe. And Dan, you saw all of training camp. One guy you didn't see at all was J.C. Tretter, Browns center. How big of a concern is it? Does anybody have a sense? Is he going to be ready to go week one? And if not, how big of a concern is that for this offense?
Well, Kevin Stefanski has certainly not come anywhere close to ruling him out for week one. And the thing about Tretter is, if he's anywhere close to being able to go, I think he'll go. This is a guy that played through a really nasty high ankle sprain a few years ago, didn't miss a snap. And I know those guys, him and Bitonio especially, take a lot of pride in the fact that they haven't missed a snap since playing together. And he's going to try to keep that going. Now, if he's unable to go, that means you're going to have two rookies on that offensive line. You're going to have Cheddar Quills at left tackle, which you were planning for, of course, but now you're going to have one at center going against the Baltimore Ravens, and you lose some of that institutional knowledge, if you will, because J.C. Tretter has played the Ravens a bunch of times. He knows what they do. Even if the personnel is a little different, he knows what they do. And so that puts a little more onus on Bitonio. He's going to have to help make some calls, and he's going to have to help guide that rookie center along. It's a really tough position to throw a rookie out there, and then on top of that, you're going to have to go play another game 4 days later.
Yeah, and the thing with Tretter, if he's 75% physically, the thing that you miss if he's unable to be out there is that making the calls and knowing exactly what everybody should be doing. And I think that's even more important than, and don't get me wrong, he's a really good offensive lineman physically, but it's that mental game and making the calls that I think he excels in that the Browns would miss if he is not out there.
And it's that trust he has with Baker Mayfield, too. That's one of those. We always talk about the quarterback-receiver relationship. We talk about guys Baker trusts in the receiving corps. But, that quarterback-center relationship is important, too, because they have to be able to see the same things. And, again, when you've got a rookie left tackle out there, you love to have a guy at center who's going to be able to sort of take charge, be able to run the show on the offensive line, take some of that load off Bitonio because he's going to be busy helping out that left tackle over to his left. You just like having those two kind of rocks in the middle working together who know each other really well and frankly fit this scheme perfectly.
What about Cheddar Quills, the rookie left tackle? Have you seen some of the progress, or has it been kind of uneven?
It's been uneven. There have been some moments where he's gotten beat, and you aren't real excited to see him go against the Ravens in week 1. After that. And it's just a reminder, I think, that it's really unfair to expect him to step on the field and be Joe Thomas. Right? It's unfair to expect anybody to be that. Joe Thomas stepped on the field game 1 and didn't leave for 10,000 snaps. He's going to walk into Canton as soon as he's eligible. With Wills, this is a guy that just didn't get any real practice time in the spring. And I really do think that hurts an offensive lineman. I mean, speaking of Thomas, just think about how much practice time he had before his rookie year. I mean, back then you were still doing 2-a-days, and your off-season program was longer and more physical. In this era, it's already hard for offensive linemen to kind of get ready and get on the same page and get together. And now when you lose the entire spring and a pretty good chunk of July and August, it makes it even more difficult.
And to Kevin Stefanski and Bill Callahan, offensive line coach, credit, they seem to understand that, and it seems like they're kind of preaching patience with Cheddar Quills, not only to the fans, but to Cheddar Quills himself.
Yeah, they've been really good about sending the message that they understand it's not going to necessarily be smooth right away. And there's going to be some hiccups. The only thing you got to watch is, if he's just completely overmatched, that's when you maybe have to say, all right, we got to throw Kendall Lamb out there or Chris Hubbard out there. We just got to make sure that we can protect Baker Mayfield. But if Cheddar Quills can at least, hold his own and be good enough until he finds his footing, then, we might get to week 15, week 16, and say, hey, you know what? Cheddar Quills has a chance to be pretty good, but it's going to be kind of a season-long progression.
When you look at Baker Mayfield, again, it's been an uneven training camp. Is it a factor of new offense, really working on mechanics, almost like it would be spring training for a baseball pitcher, or is there more reason to be concerned with what's gone on in the scrimmages that they've had?
I'm still willing to give Baker the benefit of the doubt, just because I do think it is a new offense. He's kind of learning some new weapons with an Austin Hooper out there and some other guys. So I'm willing to give him a little bit of a pass right now. Now, if we get into the season and he's still struggling, and of course, if he's still turning the football over, that's a real problem. Then it's time to be concerned. But the nice thing about this offense, if nothing else, is if they're not quite ready yet to unleash the whole playbook and get everything ready to go on September 13th, they can turn and hand the ball off a bunch to Nick Chubb and then turn and hand the ball off a bunch to Kareem Hunt. You don't want to do that for 16 games, but you can kind of ease your way into this and let Baker get comfortable. But right now, I'm not going to panic about Baker. I'm not going to say I'm real concerned. I've just got to see what it looks like on Sundays.
You mentioned the tight end position. That's a huge part of what Kevin Stefanski likes to do. What have you seen from the tight end position in training camp for the Browns, and what should we expect, come regular season?
The great news is Austin Hooper has lived up to the hype. He's looked like a guy that's going to catch a ton of footballs this year. And there was one practice where he had a drop, and you see it, and you're like, wait a minute, who was that? It was Austin Hooper. He dropped the ball. That's weird. So that tells you kind of how reliable he already is. The other guy is Harrison Bryant. I really like what the rookie has done. He's really kind of hit the ground running. And when David Njoku was out with the wrist issue, Harrison Bryant took advantage. And I think there's a real chance Bryant could push Njoku for playing time, especially if David comes out and struggles early and puts some balls on the ground. Harrison Bryant could make a move up to that number 2 tight end spot. He's really accelerating quickly up that tight end chart.
Do you think Bryant is the type of guy that you can maybe split out a little bit too and create some mismatches? This offense is really big on creating mismatches, and if you've got a 6'4" tight end that can run a little bit, that's got mismatch written all over it.
He's exactly that guy. At FAU, I had a chance to talk to Charlie Weiss Jr., who was his offensive coordinator at FAU, and Bryant would come into his office and they'd come up with these plays where they would split him out wide and put him in those situations where he was one-on-one against guys. And Ohio State fans might remember that game at the Horseshoe where he was split out wide and he made a really nice catch on a fade over Jeffrey Okudah, the number 3 pick in the draft. So this is a guy who's not afraid to get out there and mix it up with some really good corners, and I think he has that ability to split out wide and make plays sort of in that hybrid receiver role, if that's where they want to put him.
Yeah, it's one of the things, if you decide to put a linebacker on him, he's too fast. If you decide to put a cornerback or a safety on him, he's just going to out-muscle him. So those are all good. What about the running back situation? Do you fully expect, because you haven't had any preseason games, you haven't really had a chance to do some of the precision type things that this offense likes to do passing, do you expect to see a lot of Nick Chubb and also Kareem Hunt? I mean, those are two guys that's like, okay, let's just run the defense into the ground.
I mean, your goal is to win, right? So, yeah, I think if that's what you're going into Baltimore, looking to win that football game, that's going to be what you have to do. Give the ball to Nick Chubb and let him run. Use Kareem Hunt in different ways. But, again, give him the football and let him run. You've got the former rushing champion in Hunt, the guy who should have won it last year in Chubb. And those are really positions where it doesn't take a lot to get ready necessarily. There's not a ton of precision in those positions. You take the football, you find the hole, and you run through it. And after that, you just try and make guys miss. So that's really the easiest way to kind of go about things if you're not quite sure your offense is all the way there yet.
The other thing that does, running the ball with those two guys, it forces the defense after a while to cheat up. And then you've got Odell Beckham, who's going to get behind him. And you've also got Jarvis Landry, who just finds a way to find spots in zones and spots behind linebackers. It would seem that running the football would set the two elite wide receivers up to have some big plays.
Right, and this is such a play-action-heavy offense anyway. And I know there's have to react to the run game regardless, but they have to react even more when you do establish the run and when your running backs are really good, and you've got to account for them. So the Browns are going to have the ability to maybe start drawing those Ravens up, like you said, put 8 in the box, and now you've got a single coverage situation with Odell, or you can sneak a tight end out, or maybe Jarvis can get downfield. That's something the Browns have been really good with. In Miami, they never really let him go downfield, but the Browns have, no matter who the coordinator has been, taken advantage of his ability to get downfield and, like you said, find those seams and do some different things with him. So, that's really where it starts. Defenses have to find a way to stop Nick Chubb. They have to find a way to stop Kareem Hunt. And if you can take advantage of that in your passing game, it's going to make life really difficult.
Who's somebody that's really impressed you in training camp that you're really anxious to see game time?
Well, the guy I'm really anxious to see is honestly Hunt. He's looked really good. He looks in shape. He looks fast. If you're looking for kind of a name sort of down the depth chart a little bit, a guy who's sort of risen up and I don't want to say come out of nowhere because he was around last year and did get on the field, but it seemed like they really like Caderel Hodge, potentially as that third receiver, which is interesting because I think most of us have penciled in Rashard Higgins there. But he's a guy who ran with the first team a lot, was gone for a personal issue for a few days, and when he came back, he was right back with the first team. So he's got a chance to maybe get on the field. He's a fast guy. He can play on special teams. I'm kind of curious to see how much they actually like him and how they want to use him. And another guy, just a little hint of something, is JoJo Natson. Brought him in to be a returner, but he's gotten some run as a receiver. And Kevin Stefanski the other day said he views Natson as a football player. And that tells me that maybe he's not going to be on the field for 70 offensive snaps, but maybe you'll see them get a little creative with a guy like that if they put him on the roster.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. We'll step aside, take one more time out. When we return, some of the challenges that face the Browns is no preseason games, a new head coach, a new offense, a new defense. We'll talk Browns as they get ready for the 2020 NFL opener coming up. More sports and less Levine. The Weekend Winners Edition will be right back. Stay with us.
Wow! Get Nature's Stone and never replace your garage flooring again. Act now for huge summer savings on our exclusive Nature's Blend Stone, as low as $2.99 a square foot plus installation. Only Nature's Stone eliminates cracked, uneven concrete, and Nature's Stone never peels like cheap paints and coatings. Safe, beautiful garage flooring that's always backed by Russell's Promise, our true unconditional warranty. Schedule your free cost estimate easily online today at naturestone.com. It's not just a floor.
Wow, it's Nature's Stone.
There are tastes we remember. Every smell brings the happiness of times gone by. Experience this every time you walk into Gallucci's Italian Foods. Whether you need lunch on the go, a catered party, or that perfect blend of wine, meats, and cheeses, Gallucci's has exactly what you're looking for. Straight from Mama's Kitchen for old world traditions or original experiences. From the tastes you remember to new flavors you'll never forget, Gallucci's is a tasty branch of your family tree.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to More Sports and Less Levine, the Weekend Winners Edition. I'm Dave Bacon, talking Browns football as they get ready to go into game week mode coming up, getting ready for the 2020 opener against the Ravens. Let's welcome back in Dan Labbe, beat reporter for the Browns here on cleveland.com, as well as in the pages of the Plain Dealer. Dan, how big of a disadvantage is it for not only Kevin Stefanski, but every single team that has a first-year head coach? No preseason games, really no off-season to work on installing offenses and defenses, a lot of work via Zoom. How big of a disadvantage is it for guys that are in their first year and trying to get a new system installed?
It's huge because you're trying to get guys to understand not just your system, but what you want to do in it and how it all works, how they all fit. And then on top of that, you want guys to get a feel for how you are as a coach on the sideline and how your guys are up in the booth. And you kind of miss out on that without preseason games. So you just sort of, everything is a little more difficult because that first game is sort of the first time for a lot of things. And for the Browns in particular, that first game happens to come against a Super Bowl contender in the Baltimore Ravens. So just not having a chance to establish a lot of those things and not getting a chance to really get to know guys because guys aren't in the locker room together and you're not all in meeting rooms together and things like that. You just lose out on a lot of those kind of community things that help build a team together and get them ready to go in week one.
Do you get a sense that it will be Kevin Stefanski calling plays? I know they really haven't made it known if it's going to be Stefanski or Alex Van Pelt. The impressive thing here is it doesn't seem like Kevin Stefanski's really hung up on it. And I think that's a credit because he realizes there's a lot of things that go on the plate of a head coach not involving play calling. Do you get a sense, though, who will be calling the plays?
I was convinced all along that because of the weird offseason, it was going to be Kevin Stefanski. It's his offense. He knows how he wants it called. But we're seeing a lot of signs that it actually might be Alex Van Pelt. I believe it was Van Pelt who was calling the plays on Sunday when they were practicing at the stadium, and they went into scrimmage mode. We're going to get a chance to see what happens at the stadium to see who calls plays there during their kind of dress rehearsal tonight. So, I don't know how this is ultimately going to play out, but I'm almost leaning more towards maybe it will be Alex Van Pelt who ends up calling the plays. And you said it. That's one of the impressive things about Stefanski. I don't think he's super tied to play calling. It's something he enjoys, but it's also something that he's kind of said before, sort of wears you out and it exhausts you. And I think he understands that his success isn't going to be tied to how great the offense is. His success is going to be tied to, do the Browns win or lose football games? He's here to be the head coach, that CEO type of guy.
What about Alex Van Pelt? How important is he to the success of this? Just not only the play calling, but that's a guy that really kind of has to take over and guide Baker Mayfield to be the type of quarterback that the Browns thought he could be 2 years ago.
He's huge because one of the first things he said is, I'm going to redo Baker Mayfield's footwork. So if Baker Mayfield has a big bounce back year, Alex Van Pelt is going to get a ton of credit for it because he's really come in, and it's not just the footwork, but he's really coached up Baker Mayfield, and he's really tried to get him to take that next step and clean up some of the things that were a problem last year. Some of the things were out of his control, but there were other things like the footwork and maybe bailing on clean pockets, things like that Baker needs to take on himself to get better. He's in better shape, and I think that's partially Alex Van Pelt making it clear what Baker needs to look like when he comes back to camp. So I think Alex Van Pelt is really important to this offense. When you look at this staff in general, Van Pelt, Bill Callahan is a guy who's really important. Some of these assistants are really going to, I don't want to say they're going to make or break the season, but they're really important for a rookie head coach as he kind of tries to navigate this.
What's the biggest concern that you have given the situation that the Browns face with new offense, new defense, haven't been able to get rookies at game speed? What concerns you the most as you think forward to the 2020 season?
The word you said there was speed, and I think that's it. The speed of the game. We always talk about how it gets a little bit faster. Right in the spring, in the off-season program, there's not a lot of contact allowed. You're kind of just getting used to things. In training camp, it ratchets up. You can put on pads. You can be more competitive. Then you get into preseason games, and it gets just a little bit faster because now guys are really competing. You can hit quarterbacks, things like that. So we're just missing those steps up in speed. So for a guy like Cheddar Quills, for example, he's never felt what anything close to a full-speed NFL game is going to feel like. Even a guy like Baker Mayfield, he hasn't taken a hit since December. So, he wouldn't have been getting hit in training camp, but certainly in a preseason game or two, he probably would have taken a hit. And while you don't love to see your quarterback get hit, you do kind of want to see him take that first hit before you go out there against Baltimore and things are really live. So I think just kind of ramping up that speed for everybody is really where you're missing out on things.
And do you think that's magnified even that much more because it is a new offensive system? It is a new defensive system. You can walk through it, you can do all the Zoom things you want, but until you're doing it at full speed, you're not really doing it.
Right. I think it was Drew Brees once who said that the Saints, like him and Sean Payton, they're kind of on graduate level, right, with their offense. They just know things so well. They don't even have to think about things, and they can just keep advancing and putting in new things. That's never really been the case with the Browns. And again, here we go again. They're just, they're elementary level with all this stuff. They're just learning everything. And you're going to have to sort of, whether you're trying to or not, you have to think through everything you do out on the football field. And the goal is to eventually have the system mastered so that you don't have to think through things. And now you can get creative and layer things on top of what you already know. So it's really just the idea of you almost have to think out there, and you don't want to have to think out.
What have been some of the most impressive things? I mean, we've seen so many regimes just in the last few years, probably more than we would like to have. What about this regime, coaching regime, and front office, has impressed you?
The way they've sort of messaged when they've talked to us is really, the composure that they show. Just going back to Freddie Kitchens, right? There were times when Freddie would get asked about something and he'd kind of say the right thing, or he'd avoid saying something he shouldn't, and then he couldn't help himself. So then he'd go on a rant about Bob Wiley, or he'd go, he'd say something that would get out and make national headlines. Now, that's great for us. I don't know if that's necessarily great for the head coach of a football team who's trying to establish a culture. With Kevin Stefanski, he's just really good in saying what he wants to say. And a lot of times that's not saying much at all. We're still kind of trying to figure out, what kind of questions he'll really get into. It's sort of the Bill Belichick thing, right? There's some things where Bill Belichick will just light up and go on forever. We're still trying to find that with Kevin Stefanski, but he's just been completely unflappable so far throughout this process.
What about the preparation? I mean, it looks like they really thought this through and are pretty organized. I mean, is that, again, I haven't been there nearly as much as you have. Is that an accurate assessment from afar?
It feels like they know what they want to do. And I'll be honest, there's been times when I've kind of looked at it and I've said, I'm not really sure why they aren't practicing a little more competitively. I'm not sure why they're doing so much walkthrough stuff. But at the same time, it seems like they have a plan in place and they know how they want to get to that week 1 game and where they want to be when they get on that plane to go to Baltimore. They've got it all set out. And frankly, they're not going to tell us, nor do they have to. So we're kind of watching and trying to figure out this plan that they have in place. But it seems like it's been pretty straightforward that they want to make sure everything's installed that needs to be installed, make sure everybody understands the offense. And the goal is to get as many people as they can. Now, it hasn't worked in every case, but try and get as many people as they can healthy to Baltimore, ready to play that football game.
When you look at this team, if you were able to say, this is going to be solved or this is going to be okay, what do you think needs to be that one thing that is good or better than you thought it would be for them to be successful?
I think the secondary as a whole, really the back, I guess that whole back 7 of the defense, when you take the linebackers and the secondary together, I think that's the area of the team that we talked about earlier that is still the most concerning. Denzel Ward, like I said, I think he's poised to have a really good year, but what about everybody else around him? And if those linebackers can't cover, if those safeties can't come up and tackle Lamar Jackson or whoever else is running the football for the Ravens, and if they're able to attack over the top of those tight ends, because B.J. Goodson maybe, even though he looked really good in camp, maybe he's not ready to cover an elite tight end in an elite offense. That's what really concerns me is the back 7 getting picked on, especially if that front 4 can't create pressure.
What are your thoughts? I get the sense, just because of the way Baker Mayfield has presented himself when he's been in the media and around, I get the feeling he's getting ready for a bounce-back season. What is your sense of how Baker will respond?
I kind of get that same sense from him. I think he understands what last year was and what he did wrong last year. And he kind of came back this year a little bit quieter, maybe on purpose, maybe because of circumstances, but a little bit quieter, has said all the right things, has done all the right things. And I think he knows that this offense is really built around him and that this organization continues to go all in on making him a better quarterback. And he understands, frankly, look, if I have a big year 3, I can make a lot of money after this season. So he gets that part of it too. I think Baker Mayfield has every chance to have a breakout year. Like I said earlier, his camp hasn't been great. It's been a little concerning, but what matters is what he does on Sundays. And what matters is what he does with what they install each week and how he plays in those football games. So I'm excited to see what Baker can do in this offense.
From afar, it seems like a different attitude. Even Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and some of the other guys, there have been not any crazy claims or chest thumping, and I think that's directly opposite of what we saw last year. Is that a fair assessment of how the Browns have kind of presented this year?
I think it's a very fair assessment. Everyone has been fairly muted. Again, some of that is intentional. Some of that is because, there just hasn't been the access to a lot of these guys. But we're not seeing national media covering this team like they were last year. We're not seeing, the Sports Illustrated covers or the Players Tribune pieces and things like that. This team has come in and just gone about their business. And it's been a good thing for this team to be flying under the radar. I think they probably could have used that last year. It was probably impossible after the finish they had and the moves they made in the offseason, especially to bring in Beckham. But to be flying under the radar is a really good thing for this team. And a lot of people felt burnt by their predictions last year and all the hype. And I know the Browns have admitted they didn't manage expectations well. And it seems like they're doing a better job of it this season.
Dan Labbe, Browns beat reporter for cleveland.com, as well as the pages of the Plain Dealer. As always, we appreciate the insight. We'll be talking to Dan as the NFL season gets underway and throughout the 2020 NFL season. That'll do it for us on this edition of More Sports and Less Levine. Les will be back in the chair Monday, and we'll see you again next Friday. Thanks for joining. Stay safe. Have a great weekend, everybody.